All right, today we want to continue our master detail discussion. Just a quick review. Last time we talked about delegates and protocols and how a table view needs to have a delegate. Whoever the delegate is has to follow the table view protocols. We implement certain functions that a table view has to have. Then we created a master detail application. Created a new project which gave us everything that we needed. Gave us in the storyboard, please. It gave us a view controller, a navigation controller, that's linked to a view controller. This navigation controller, its main purpose is just to handle this navigation bar across the top. That's its primary purpose. And because it's linked to these, the nav bar controller controls what's in the top of these things and responds to them appropriately. Here's our table view, but this is a table view controller. This is not just a table view. It's a table view controller, which means it's an entire view with just a table view inside it that then processes the table view. The detail that we got also gave us a prototype cell, and we can tweak that today if we want to, and we probably will tweak that a little bit today so that we can control how our data displays in the cells. And then finally, it also gave us a detail view. And the detail view then shows us whatever details we want about whatever record we clicked in the navigation or in the master view. We did a little bit of playing around. We created our own class. Here's the family member class. Didn't mean to double click that. Here's the family member class that we created. It has a first name, a last name, and a date. Everything initialized to a string. What I want to do first today is modify that birth date and actually turn it into a date instead of a string. There's nothing wrong with a string, except if we want to know how old somebody is, we're going to have to convert the string into a date. Might as well make it a date, and then we can ask, or we can maybe in the date class calculate how many years that is, the difference between the date and the current date. Other than that, nothing real exciting. We just concatenated the first name and the last name. And the primary reason I did that is because I want to display them concatenated in my table view. You can display whatever you want in the table view from a class, anything you want. And before we get done, I think we'll even be in a state where we can customize the table view and add images and anything to them. Every cell can be customized so that every cell is a little bit different. Remember when we execute and we went to the settings, I can't launch this right now because it still has an error in it. When we went to the settings, some items in the settings are turned on, some items in the settings are turned off. Those are all table views, but they have different icons. And you write code behind the scenes to say, if this feature is on, then use this icon for this cell, otherwise use that icon for this cell. You can change things as you go. Very, very powerful, that table view controller. Then we looked around a little bit and saw the master view controller. We got a lot of code that we need just to make things work. And here's the view did load, and in the view did load, they added some buttons to the navigation bar. Then we have built-in code that inserts a new object. All it does right now is inserts a date. Before we're done, we'll modify that to insert a new family member with a birth date. But for right now, we're going to ignore that because it just inserts a date. We have an error here that we'll fix very quickly. Whenever you click on one of the table view cells, it is wired to a push event. The push event is basically says, segue to the next view. Segue is the Apple term for go to the next view or go back to a different view. And whenever you run the push event automatically executes the prepare for segue method. So that's built in. All we have to do is figure out which view we're going to. Okay, are we segue? Right now we only have one, and that's the show detail segue. The segues are actually here in the storyboard, so we can modify them. These are the segues, and we can tweak them. And if you click on this one, and I don't see a whole lot of information, we can see that this one has a show detail name. And you can change the name to something else. But the point is that every segue to a different view has its own name, and so then in the code we have to ask which one are we going to, and then if it's appropriate, in this case, we're going to grab the appropriate detail item and transfer it to our detail view before we segue. Bunch of other stuff that was built for us, all the protocol stuff. This is protocol for the table view controller. We need to know how many sections. Actually, this one's optional. If you leave it out, you get one section in your table. How many items are we going to display total? Remember that the table view controller is smart enough to only show as many as it needs to, and it manipulates it all to keep your memory down. What does each cell look like? And this is where you would modify it if you wanted to customize it. Can we edit a row? Just about every row is editable. And then finally, what do we do if they click on one of the buttons in editing? You can have different buttons, but for us, the primary purpose is going to be to delete. Okay. And then later on, we might have an insert button as well. But when we delete, this writes the code. Remember that behind the scenes, there is an array of objects. We could change that to, and right now it's an NS mutable array. We could change that and make it an array of Swift object, a Swift array, and we probably will to make it something we're a little more comfortable with. NS mutable array is the Objective-C version of our collections of an array that can grow. In Swift, it's just an array, and so we'll go with that as well. So this is the master view controller. When we built the master detail application, a lot of this was set up for us. The add button is already there. The insert objects is all set up for dates. What we have to do is convert it to family members. There's also a detail view. In the detail view, you have a detail item. And we'll see if we look closely at the master view controller modifies this. Takes whatever information you clicked on in the table, finds its corresponding element in the array, sends it to the detail view and say, here's what he wants to mess with. And it gets stored in here. And this is why we're getting an error. This says it's a family member. And in the other page, we're still sending a date, and those two are not compatible. That's why we're getting an error. But we don't have anything to send yet. We ran out of time. Didn't have time to build an array of family members. We have to build that first before we can send any family members over here. So we're going to do that. Notice this family member is optional. Comes in real handy when you're inserting. You're inserting records. If there is no family member, you can check that. And down here where it says let the detail member equal a family member, we can put an if, and there's an else here, and we do an else clause that says if this doesn't work. This says take this detail item and stick it into this variable called detail. Anybody remember why we bothered transferring it from the detail item into something different? Unwraps it. So now this is an alternative way of putting an exclamation mark on everything. What this basically says is if this exists, assign it to a variable called detail. If it doesn't, and that automatically, this is not optional anymore. This is not an optional variable, so at that point I can mess with the detail all I want and not have to worry about exclamation marks and question marks.
And that, if it doesn't contain it, it skips it.
Skips it.
If you have the exclamation point, you're going to have an error.
If I had exclamation marks on here, it would, if it didn't exist. And in this case, it skips it. And for us, that may sound nasty. We skip it, but actually it works out pretty well because if we're inserting a new record, there won't be a detail item. It won't have anything in it yet. It still exists, right, but it'll be null. Pardon me?
What do you want to add? No.
We'll have to make sure we put something we created, instantiate it, and then in the if statement say, give me just empty boxes on my screen. And then as the user enters information, when the user hits save, we transfer everything off the scene into the detail and send it back to the master view and say, here, add this to the master array. Everything else in here is pretty generic code. There is a configure view. That's the one it's not a special function, it's just a custom function that's added to this class to figure out this is where we go to figure out how we're going to display things. View did load. Once we load it, we configure the view, and then go from there. Okay, the part that people have trouble getting their heads around sometimes or often is the fact that there is this backing array that shows, and still highlighted, that stores all of our data. Our app in this case is going to somehow have to store that data, and the app that we're writing in this unit is very forgetful. Once we stop the app, the array of family members starts over again. If we delete family members, if we edit family members, if we add family members, our app at this stage in Unit 5 is not going to remember any of that. So it has limited use except to demonstrate how to do that communication from the table view controller, the master view, to the detail view controller, and back again. And then what we'll do in Unit 6 to wrap up the semester is talk about core data, which is basically the database component of iOS, and how to build a database and how to write to it and how to read from it, etc. And pull that data so that we have persistent data. It sticks. This app doesn't do that. So when you run it, if it starts over every single time you run it, or every time you build it, it starts over with fresh data, that's probably a good thing for right now. Okay, so next thing I want to do before I forget, because I'm getting close to forgetting here, on OneDrive, I have put a very basic date class. These are called wrapper classes. I don't like NSDate, it's too complicated. I'm writing my own date class, and I'm inviting you to help participate with it. Now I'm going to leave that up there. If you wish, you can put your own version up there. Please leave my master one alone. But if you wish, this is OneDrive in a place where you have access. You can put the Justin date up there if you want, or the Reen date up there if you want, and share it with other people. The one I have up there is very basic. It's just a wrapper class for NSDate, so I don't have to do NSDate to have my own class called date. So let's go get that. I'm going to download it to my desktop temporarily. And now that I've downloaded it, how do I get it into my project? Well, this is what I think is very, I want to almost say amazing for iOS, is we simply drag this into here, park it wherever you want. And since it's kind of a support class, I'm going to tuck it underneath my family member class. Do you want to copy it? Yes. Simply finish. And now that class is in here. Still on my desktop because we copied it. So I can copy it again later if I need to. I don't think I want to. I'm going to move that to the trash before I forget. Right, but I have a copy of that now in this project. So if you want to share a class from one project to the next, you simply copy the files. And I could have just as easily gone into, well, I don't think you can just drag it into, here's my in-class 5 folder. I don't think we could have just dragged it into here. I don't think it's that simple. I think you have to drag it into Xcode. Then Xcode copies it, and here's the date class, it's here. Right, but I don't think you can do the reverse. Just use Finder and drag it in there and then have Xcode just find it. I think just like Visual Studio, Xcode needs some kind of a link. It keeps its own directory, dictionary of the items that are in the project. And the only way that link occurs is if you drag it into Xcode. But still relatively simple to do. And we don't need to do anything special to access this class, just like our family member class. Once it's in the project, you simply reference it when you need it. No include statements, none of that kind of stuff. Let's take a quick look at the date class that I wrote. Again, as I said, there isn't much to it. It stores an NSDate. Okay, so when I send it a date, it actually stores an NSDate because that's built into the language. I didn't feel the need to create a month, day, year and manipulate it all myself. There is an NSDate. All I'm doing is putting a wrapper around it so I can communicate with it my way instead of the NSDate way.
What do you mean by a wrapper?
All I mean by a wrapper is, and I had the same problem, and when I finally wrote this, I think it finally clicked for me. there is a date class, NS date, right? But I don't like it. I don't like communicating with it. I can never remember how to communicate with it. Of course, now that I have my own date class, I won't remember how to communicate that way either. But at least it's got a decent name. All the wrapper does is takes the NS date class that we already have and puts another layer around it with object names, with methods that I define instead of methods defined by NS date. And actually, let's call it a translator. It translates the stuff that I send into NS date code. If I, for some reason, want to, I added this property because I wanted to return an NS date. Most of the time, I'm messing with a date, and that's my own class. But if I want the NS date version of my date, the inner core of my wrapper class, I wrote that so that I can return it. Occasionally, I need that. But then inside here, I have an initialization, so I can create a brand new date by sending it a year, month, and day. And then this little function does all the magic to convert a year, month, and a day into an NS date and stores it in there. And there's another one down here that's another initialization if you give it a string. It'll take the date string and format it. By default, it assumes your string is in ISO format. If it's not, you can specify a different format, but you don't have to specify that at all. That's an optional parameter because it has a value set to it. So if I want to instantiate a date using just a string, as long as it's an ISO format, I can send it in. And this again takes it apart and stores it in the date. And the last thing I did is wrote a little function that allows me to spit out a date formatted. The format is optional because, again, it's been assigned a value. So really all you need to say is toString. And if you say toString, then you get the October 27, 2014 version. If you don't like that, then send in your own formatting string and you'll get a string in your format. So very basic stuff. This class doesn't know how to add days yet or doesn't know how to do any date math. If I wanted to do that, I could put that in here. And who knows what else you might want to do with it. But it does give you the ability to create an NS date without having to worry about how to communicate with NS date and to toString a date and go from there. So let's modify our family member class then to use this new date. So I'm going to go into the family member, and the birth date is not going to be a string anymore. Now it's going to be of type date. And what's wrong with that?
No, there's no, it's never initialized. They don't like it.
How did I do that?
The class doesn't have any initializers.
Oh, okay. That's what's missing. All right, so there's my date. Notice I'm not getting an error on that line. I'm getting an error on the family member because I don't have an init for family member, and this date now needs something to init. I think these are all initialized. If I init this to something, then it'll sit and be fairly happy. But I'll probably want an initializer anyways, but let's just initialize this to, just do it this way, 1971, 1. No, it doesn't like that. Why not? Probably need to do a new date. Wrong language. New is not required. Are you happy now? Oh, come on.
Now, on this set, for me, it told me to put a semicolon after date, but then it still goes back to, then you get the error of class family member has no initializers.
Maybe you have to, oh, I have to put the names on there? Really?
Nope.
How do we make the names? I thought the names are optional, or maybe not in a class.
Uh,
There we go. So now it's initialized, and at least this first family member has no name and has a generic date, and we could make that generic date anything you want it to be, or we can create an initializer. I think it's probably a good time to create that initializer, so while we're here, let's do it real quick. We're going to need it at some point. So it's just init, and then whatever you want to send it. All right, first name, let's just call it first, otherwise we can do it first name. First name, colon, string. Last name, colon, string. And the birth date, type date. So that's what we send in. And then we simply need to transfer those up to here. So we say self.firstname equals first name. The reason we had to do the self is because the parameter name is the same as the property name. If you make them different, make them F, L, and B. Not very descriptive, right? But
Or you could use the external and internal names.
the external and internal names, well, that still has a parameter, but I can't. Is it a pound sign to make it external and internal?
No, it shows first name space F colon string.
Oh, okay. But the space is the internal name then?
Second,
would be
the
done.
second is the internal name.
Second is the internal name, but this works for me, so I'm going to go with it. Can do it either way.
The due and birth date.
So that's one initializer. The other, if we just do init, if we just create one, it'll use the initial values from up there, but if we want to actually send something in, just do it this way. So our family member has an initializer now. Our date is good. I'm just going to hit Command Save here to get rid of my dirty files. And what else do we have to do? Now we probably have to go into the Master View controller. And see if there's anything else. I think my array of objects, I just want to make it an array of family members. Got the right syntax, or is it family members in square brackets?
Objects.
Well, if all else fails, go back to the notes. Equals type square brackets. That would not have been my first thought, but okay. So back to my code. We need to do an equals family member parentheses. There we go.
Different way I did var members colon and then in brackets family member equals an empty array.
Okay, so the alternative to this was var members colon, right?
Yep,
No square brackets around family member?
yep, there it is.
There is. So that tells it's an array of family members. equals an empty array. Right? The only reason I'm getting an error is because I've got it declared twice. So that's an alternative. Good, thank you. Either way, should work. Now I have an array of family members. At some point, I need to fill those up. So I'm going to come down here and view did load, and after it adds all its buttons, I'm going to call a function called fill sample data. Doesn't exist, so now I create it. Function fill sample data. And inside here, I'm just going to add a bunch of members to my array. Now I have to remember how to do that. It's probably 3 different ways again. So I can just do a plus equals in square brackets, and that's an array that puts multiple member. I can append, or I can insert.
You just initialize the array with your top.
I could, but then if I want to add a couple of hundred of them, particularly if it's complicated, that's all going to be embedded in there.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do anything terribly complicated here, but I want to add an object, a new family member, parentheses. I should be able to just do a plus equal, so let's try that. So inside here, I want to say members plus equals a new, no, just a family member. Always want to say new. And I'll put my name in here. I think I'm probably going to have to put the first name. Put your own name in there if you wish. And for the birth date, I now need to do a date parentheses, and I think I'm going to use a string this time. I don't think I need the date string. Let's find out. And I'll use 1958-08-16. Put that in your calendar and wish me a happy birthday when it's appropriate. Didn't like it? Family member is not identical to UI8. Say what? I'm going to figure out how to get rid of those.
The names,
Pardon me?
the name of the.
I got it, yeah, but I'd like to be able to not have to put that name on there if I don't want to. I think it's pretty obvious what that is. If it's a string, it's in a date format. I don't think I need to label it. Let's see if I can get back to the plus equals now. Nope.
Got rid of the error there. I did append, and it worked.
Yeah, I got append. But according to my notes, plus equal ought to work halfway decent. Oh, this is concatenating array to another array.
So if you wrapped it in
In square brackets, maybe?
brackets, probably work.
Maybe. Okay, so now we got one. Now let's just go add another one.
Square brackets.
You can do the plus equals square brackets, and then everyone you add, you just
Yeah, it's the same thing with a pen, right?
Yeah, but then you gotta write a pen that many times and like, I mean, I don't know what's more expensive, but.
I don't either. So I'm going with this because it works. You can do your pens, the plus equals square brackets. Right now I'm having keyboard issues because I've been using a Windows machine all night long. Did I switch views? No. Fill sample data. I'm going to put 3 in there. Feel free to put whatever you want in there. Okay, now we need to clean up the rest of this stuff because we've created an array of family members, and so that's going to cause a few problems here. First one is inserting a new object. I think in this, I'm simply going to comment it out. We're not going to be inserting until a little bit later. So right now, if you click the plus sign, nothing happens. But what I want to get is my family member names displayed in the table to start with. Then the second phase is whenever I click on one of those to get that detail information displaying in the detail view. So down here, the segue still got an error because the detail item gets sent this object, which we don't have. Right, so the first thing we got to do is if the index path, if there's a selected row, then let object equal members as a family member. We can rename object to member or something. You can do whatever you want with it. I'm just going to stick with it, leave it the way it is. Create this object. If there is a selected row, then let the object equal this and segue by sending that over. And notice my error went away. It's because we already changed it to a family member in the detail view.
Isn't the as keyword like a typecast?
That would be my guess. But why would I even need it? Members is defined as an array. This is a row. Happy so far. Okay, now we got some issues down here. There's no objects anymore, so we do members subcount. There's no objects anymore. What's this one? For row. Oh, this is where we define what do we want to see in our cell. So this is cell for row at index path. What do we want to see in there?
Change objects to members.
So now we have to once again change objects to members. Probably don't need the, definitely don't need the NS date, probably don't need anything. And then the cell's text is going to be equal to my object's, what do I want to display? The full name.
So what we're doing right now, this is the main view, not the detail view.
We're still in the main view. Yes, we're in the master view. And what we're doing in this function is defining what appears in each one of the cells.
Okay.
Next line down doesn't do anything except allow us to delete stuff. The next function down then says delete from the table view, but the way you delete from the table view is you delete from the array. So if we tell it to delete, it'll delete the member for the corresponding row, maybe. Members dot remove object at index. That's left over from NS mutable array, so now I have to go back to my notes one more time, and that would be for the syntax notes on arrays, and here we can remove just at index parentheses is what this says. Okay, so we need to remove at index parentheses. So because we changed it from an NS array or NS mutable array to just a generic array, we have to tweak some of the function calls here. And it looks like we cleaned all our errors up.
I think when you select Swift, they would have some of that stuff put in there instead of being an NS mutable array to just array.
Maybe. Maybe that's in the next edition. We'll see. And by the way, I believe this is the first recording I'm doing with Xcode 6.1 latest update embedded inside of OS X 10.10, because you can see the icons up here have changed. Not all of them, but that one in particular. That used to be the little butler guy, the assistant.
No more.
Not anymore. Now it's show me two screens at once, I guess is what that means. All right, let's switch over to the detail view real quick. And let's see what we've got here. The detail view is a family member. But now here we have birthdate.text equals birthdate, which is fine, but that's now a date. But remember, Voker's got a toString built in, and you can take that out because it's optional. And now it should display the date in the detail area. Configure the view, the label birthdate.text. How many labels do I have? Going back to my view, just to the view to see what I have there. And this must be wired to something called birthday. There I did, right there.
We just change it and then rewire it.
Yeah, you can just in your code give it whatever it was called label detail, right?
Yeah.
The reason we changed it is just to show a little bit more detail. But one of the other things to recognize is we can add more labels here. And we can add text views. And we can add all kinds of stuff. So how brave do we want to get? First, let's make sure it works. Does my birthday get sent over there? Looks like everything's pretty cool here. So I'm going to go back to normal view here, go to the detail view one more time. And when we configure the view, we say, get me this detail item, which is a family member, grab its birthday, convert it to a string, display it on the screen. This ought to run. Okay, so here's mine. I heard a couple of you say mine's broken. We'll have to take a look at that. But here's mine. Hang on. And I'll just click on me and see that's where it breaks. Okay, so it didn't like this bad instruction. Label birthdate.text. It could be.
It says that it found nil while unwrapping.
Oh, I remember this one. Okay. It was unwrapping it and it found nil. It's because we were creating this form. I've discovered, I don't know if we took an if statement out of here, we might have, but I discovered that this self-configure view, when we first come in, it doesn't always exist. And I discovered that if we comment this one out, I think that one's there. Is it that one? Or is it view did load? Must be view did load should be okay. But this one here, when I create this member, configure the view, and then it's trying to point to my label and saying that's not here. Because we sent it over. So commenting that out may be all we need. Let's try it again. Now my app delegate choked. I'm gonna pause the recording while I debug and then we'll get back into it here. Actually.